So people will not fly, they will not drive, they will work from home, they will buy an EV, they will do whatever instead of just pay endlessly higher prices. The cure for higher gas prices is higher gas prices. Hey, it's KP coming to you live from Corona, California. We are kicking off MA Week, the Mortgage Action Alliance. It is part of the Mortgage Bankers Association, which this shirt is from the annual in 2023, and just broke it out. And hopefully everyone is signing up. This is a week where we try and get to sign up so we know about advocacy and what's going on at the national level. There's a lot of state advocacy that's tied into that as well. So one of the things we did here, our amazing Laura, she pushes out every year an email to our entire company, all 1,300 plus employees, and encourages them to sign up. So we make sure that that's all done, and hopefully you have a way to implement that at your companies and be part of the game. It's an election year. We have the Road to Recovery Act out there that's making its way through. I think both parties want to say they have something going on in housing. Just went to D.C. a few weeks ago for Advocacy Week, and it's important to make sure that we have our voices heard. So let's get a seat at the table. Okay, a lot to talk about. I promise I'm going to try and rip through this thing. We had existing home sales out today, which is interesting because it's over 4 million, kind of steady as she goes. This is a steady as she goes market. So despite what you read in the headlines and the Iranian conflict and oil and this and that and all that, home buyers are gainfully employed, and they, especially the older generations, have tons of net worth, and they're able to, something like I think like 25% of down payment loans, which is 42% of loans receiving some kind of down payment, came from a family member gift. Boomer widows, check them out. I mean, they're gonna when all us dummy guys, we all die first. Everyone's going to get the money, and then the kids will get, some kind of. If you're fortunate enough to have survived and kept it all together through the years, the down payment is a big deal. It's still the biggest hurdle, but it's a steady as she goes market. Now, the first-time home buyer percentage, I think I saw was down to like 33%. But remember, that's all sales, including cash sales, is like 25%. So, some good data that cleaned that up that came out today. ICE, Intercontinental Exchange, owners of ICE Mortgage Technology, they said the first-time home buyers accounted for more than half of all purchase loans closed in March. And that's the highest share of home purchases by the cohort since June 2020. And they added that about 2/3 of FHA and VA loans went to first-time home buyers, matching a 5-year high. That's good news. You're not going to read that anywhere, but that's math, science, data, and facts. Thank you, ICE, for setting the record straight. Okay, so top-tier data coming out tomorrow, obviously, CPI, and then PPI comes out the next day. Retail sales later this week, that's obviously a good barometer of what's going on. We know what that's going to say. We know what PPI is going to say. They're both going to say, hey, people are spending a lot of money on energy, which we know that. CPI is not the preferred measure of inflation gauge for the Fed. That's the PCE. But CPI is very heavily weighted housing, which we know is coming down. So you should see some of the non-energy, remember, core strips out food and energy because they're volatile, which we're all experiencing the volatility right now, especially if you're in California, where our state doesn't really import from other states. Gas, we get it from all over the world, and then we refine it to our own special blend, and then wonder why everyone wants to drive an EV. But anyway, I digress. So CPI is, could come in at 0.2, maybe 0.3 month over month on the core reading. And if that number is at 2.7, 2.6, it's still tying into another tier one data point, last Friday's jobs report. It's still not being, wages. It's still not, wages are still outpacing that. Now, wage growth did come down. That is a reading in the internals where wage growth came down. Remember, we were talking about the Fed worried about inflation, that wage price spiral. If wages aren't, endlessly going up because there was such a labor shortage, right after COVID and all that kind of stuff, we know we're in a weak labor market. So that's actually good for inflation numbers. systemically. So despite everything we've been reading and about the Iran conflict, which I think we're finally starting to get some Iran conflict fatigue, as every geopolitical event always ends up having fatigue, and then everyone looks right through it. Seen the stock market lately? Not a financial advisor, not responsible for your losses, only your profits. Absolutely ripping. Of course, there could be some profit taking at some point, but the AI trade is about 1% of our 2% GDP, and it is rocking. Energy shortages, semiconductor shortages, hard drive, RAM memory shortages. That's all, set in the stone for about, 2027 and beyond. Energy is even beyond that. So anyway, I digress. So let's tie in CPI, and we're talking about wage growth and wage inflation. Let's tie that back to the last Tier 1 data report last week on labor. The labor force participation declined from 61.9 to 61.8. It doesn't sound like a lot, but there's like 1 million people that have left the labor force, so they're not counted. So hat tip to the MBS highway crew that pointed this out on Friday, and the Chrisman commentary had a really big write-up on their Saturday blog. So the headline number for the jobs report, 115,000 jobs created, but that's the headline number, which we know there'll be revisions, maybe up or down. There are revisions down for February, down another 64,000 jobs. March, which by the way, that brought the February number to a loss of 156,000. And the March number was actually revised up from 185,000 up 7K. That could still get revised up or down again. And obviously there's 2 more times for the number that just came out Friday to get revised down. It's like 48,000 jobs a month. That's not a lot. People are leaving the labor market. We know job cuts are at 6-year highs. You saw my video hopefully on Thursday talking about the Challenger and Gray report. 1.9% was the average hourly earnings annual rate. Okay, that's in 4.2% for production and non-supervisory roles. Again, it's still ahead of inflation. That could flip on headline for sure, but not core. And I will say this, like I said with the tariffs, when everyone was alarmist about the tariffs, there's no gun to your head to buy something more expensive. And you can only buy whatever you can afford. So people will not fly, they will not drive, they will work from home, they will buy an EV, they will do whatever instead of just pay endlessly higher prices. The cure for higher gas prices is higher gas prices. And so again, but I think the alarmists are starting to be quiet. Healthcare dominated yet again, which is government subsidized employment in the report last week, 54,000 jobs, transportation and warehousing, which is being AI'd out of existence at some point. I would say the unemployment rate, this was a very interesting breakdown that the MBS Highway crew, stick with me here for a second. The unchanged 4.3% unemployment rate. Well, that's not technically true, right? It was 4.256, which rounded up to 4.3, and then went to 4.337, which is rounded down to 4.3. That's a big move. So unemployment rate is going up, if you expand the decimal place out. And we also know there's the U6 unemployment rate that went up to 8.2% from 8. That's, so these unemployment numbers on the U3 number that comes out the first Friday of the month does not count people who are discouraged or part-time workers or those that have left the labor force. But the overall labor force is captured in the U6 number, and that went up to 8.2%. I remember during the Obama years, when it got to 8.8, people were freaking out. So labor is still weak, but it's a no hire, no fire. And as it relates to housing, if you have a job, that's our market. No offense to people unemployed, but obviously, that would get denied immediately. And so, I'm not saying lower rates from the Fed is the cure, but at some point, when this Iranian conflict ends, as all things come to an end and oil comes back down to earth, like I did briefly here and there, which I'll get into the Iran conflict in just a second. I have some good insights there. But we'll get back to inflation not being scary and labor still the thing. I did see something pretty interesting about the United Arab Emirates and the Iranian conflict. So TMS Spotlight with Les Parker, great stuff. It's very interesting. He thinks that the Iranian National Guard is going to run out of money here, which a lot of people think that. And when they do, they're going to have to make a deal, right? So you've got this more moderate regime that's in Tehran that's doing all the negotiating, via vis-a-vis Pakistan with the U.S. Then you have these crazy fanatics that are getting paid, by the way, that have been killing endlessly. So, are they going to keep killing Iranians, for not wearing a hijab, the women on their hair, if they're not getting paid? I don't know how fanatical they are, but these two factions, there's really a war going on internally in Iran, which makes it hard to just start bombing again, which I think ultimately, some of that may kick off unless China steps in. So there is, it's not just an economic summit that's going on. China is a big player with their fingerprints all over the world, and they can influence parts of Iran, cut off credit, cut off money, cut off flow, do some things. And so check out this list of people that is going to this summit. Okay, Trump's China visit this week isn't just a trade summit. The delegation includes Tim Cook, Apple, Micron's Sanjay Mehrotra, Qualcomm's Cristiano Amon, GE Aerospace's Larry Culp, Goldman's David Solomon. Gracias. No basuro. Gracias, amigo. Goldman's David Solomon, Citi's Jane Fraser, women represented at the table. Blackstone's Stephen Schwartzman and Visa's Ryan McInerney. They are going to get a test and a pulse on what's going on. These Chinese markets obviously opening up for trade for all the different things, all the different rare earths, all the semiconductor trade, banking, the payment rails, energy, all these things, but also to try and wield some influence and go step in and broker a peace here. And China's, they're taking a hit here with this thing too. They have a vested interest for the port to be open. And so they can have a seat at the table, and the Trump administration and all these business leaders can work together with China, which we have to work together with them at some point in some fashion. We always have, regardless of tariffs and CHIPS Acts and all the other things, because it's the yin and yang, right? They're the manufacturers, we're the consumer, we need each other to a certain extent. And here's one hit, I'll leave you with this. One hit that China took, this is very interesting. United Arab Emirates, right? Their central bank governor sat down with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on the sidelines of the IMF spring meetings in Washington, and he raised something unusual, the idea of a currency swap line. So all this, the rumors of the demise of the U.S. dollar, it could happen at some point, right? But still King dollar reigns. And so a swap line is essentially an emergency credit arrangement between the two central banks. They agree in advance to exchange specified amounts of currency at a fixed rate. Think petrodollar, think the deal that was cut in the 70s, the last time we had an inflation crisis, giving each side access to the other's currency in a crisis. The Fed maintains permanent swap lines with the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Canada, and the Swiss National Bank. It has never had a line extended to one of the Gulf states. So it's a foothold in that area, which we now know is critical. What was unusual wasn't just the request, it was the implied alternative. If Washington wouldn't backstop the UAE dollar liquidity through the war's economic damage, Abu Dhabi might have to start settling oil sales in Chinese yuan instead. So, commercial tankers wanting to transit pay a fee. Almost done here. Between 50 cents and $1.20 per barrel of cargo, by recent reporting, settled in Chinese yuan. So that little toll fee that Iran wants, they're selling that in yuan, right? It's all part of that BRICS Plus, the whole thing. Routed through China's SIPS payment system, France, Japan, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand, all U.S. treaty allies, are reportedly among those paying. So, I don't want to make this all about oil, but, our stability, obviously nuclear weapons got to get off the table. One of those gets launched, it's going to be all of our president's fault. So we got to make sure that gets off the table, which is part of the deal and the non-starter stuff that's going on. Of course, we need a foothold there, and we need to continue to have peace there so that Strait isn't open and shut at the whims of religious fanatical zealots that control a nuclear weapon. I digress. It's spring purchase season. I hope you're doing well. Locks are up. Locks are good. We're in a good spot. Steady as she goes. Don't believe the negativity. Have a good one. See you in New York. Ma week. Cheers.
Hey, it's KP coming to you live from Newport Harbor High School. And my daughter, Kayla, is a 7th grader, is about to run her second event today, 800 meters. She beat last Tuesday's mile with a 5:56 mile. There she is, right there, the little skinny one. Look at her try and get to the front. All right. I will try and get you the finish line as well. I had a great mindset, metacognition session with Steve Scanlon from Rewire today, and I'm totally going to butcher this quote, but he said, if you want to build a ship, don't just drum up a bunch of men, tell them to get wood and bark orders. Get them to have a love for the vast and endless sea. I thought that was pretty cool. You know, we have an abundance mindset on this podcast that I put out just twice a week. And I know that a lot of us have anchored our mindset to external things we don't control, like interest rates or inflation or what the Fed's doing. But it's been a great market. It's been a steady market. And steady growth is good. It keeps the competition out and it keeps us skilled. To use a quote I've used in the past, calm winds never made a skilled sailor. So let's take a look at Kayla. A little break here. Oh, she's in the lead. Let's go, Baba. One more lap, baby. Let's go. That's her teammate. Cammie, who's a sixth grader, who's an awesome runner. And they've both been, pacing each other the last couple weeks. Anyway, anchoring your mindset to external factors, think about it. Like, you can only control what you can control, And so let's work on our mindset. Let's work on being adaptive, right? Rather than technical. Another thing we talked about today, try and make sure that, we create good habits and good mindset and anchor our efforts and our mindset to things that we can control and we can adapt and change. CPI hot, PPI hot. Although the PPI was not so hot that the PCE, which is the Fed's preferred measure of inflation, the personal consumption expenditure, there are elements of the PPI that flow into that, and those elements were not that high. However, there are people that aren't home ownership ready that are feeling it, right? And there's a lot of talk about gasoline, but diesel is really the problem for all the economic engines around the world. Okay, here we go. Coming down the stretch. Oh, she's still in top three. Let's go, Bubba, kick! Kick, baby! Kick, baby, kick, kick, kick!
You've been listening to KP Talks Dollars and Cents, a top-rated show for those who want to learn about the economy and mortgage environment. Tune in each week for more episodes, and please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Kevin Perenio does not render or offer to render personalized investment or tax advice through KP Talks Dollars and Cents. The information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, investment, or legal advice. For more info, follow KP Talks Dollars and Cents on all of our social channels.